What did you think when you heard that forecast from the IMF? Are you kind of that dire about Chile's prospects as well?
Well, it's a concern that we have, and it's a concern that we also have in terms of putting the economy back on tracks. We are having a relevant social discussion, but the government and the opposition is articulating a response in terms of public policy and in terms of also reactivating the economy with a very sound fiscal stimulus package so that we can gain our economy and put it back on track.
I've read into that fiscal stimulus package, but at the same time, 57% of your GDP is dependent on trade. With that in mind, how focused are you on the U.S. China trade dispute, and I guess how optimistic are you now that we've seen the signing of the Phase 1 deal?
Well, cautiously optimistic. We were very happy to see this Phase 1 agreement signed. Originally, we were expecting it to be signed in Santiago, indeed. But also, the world is a complex place today. So the day after, we could see escalating tensions between the U.S. and Iran. So we're following with a very close eye the global developments. But the Phase 1 agreement is a good news. It's good news for Chile. 50% of our trade is done with the U.S. and China. China is our top, and the U.S. is our second largest trading partner. So, of course, it's relevant. We have seen a decrease in our trade of nearly 7% the last year, and most of it is explained because of commodity pricing, for instance. That is explained because of the trade tensions.
Vice Minister Rashad in Hong Kong. Does this Phase 1 trade deal have a wider implication in the sense that it undercuts the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and its rules as well by setting up bilateral deals as perhaps taking preeminence over those terms set up by the WTO itself?
Well, it's no surprise that the U.S. is choosing a bilateral approach for its trade, but nevertheless, we see it anyway as a positive outcome, because it provides somewhat certainty to international markets. Chile, as a small and open economy, will keep pushing forward multilateralism, open multilateralism. So in the next few days, we will be participating in different meetings in Davos in the context of WTO reform. So we're part of the Ottawa group. We're chairing the investment facilitation initiative in the context of WTO. E-commerce negotiations are expected to regain momentum, and we're preparing what we expect will be a fruitful discussion in the next MC12 in Nur Sultan in Kazakhstan. So I would take it anyway as a positive outcome, while Chile and other like-minded countries will keep pushing for a multilateral rules-based trading system.
Absolutely, but looking at this, Vice Minister, does this mean some substitution of some of your exports? And I'm not talking necessarily about copper, but I want to bring copper into all this. We had the Goldman Sachs head of commodities research on the show a little while ago, and he was talking really about what happens next with the price, and any bullish news has got to be good for you. So this is what he's alluding to.
The one thing it does have, it has a very idiosyncratic demand story. Chinese grid, an important part of that demand story. We're seeing to be able to, it's starting to surprise to the upside. Inventories are declining. So we'd expect the key issue with copper is you need to get the investors to buy into the story, shift the market from being short to being long, and we think that'll push you up.
So, Vice Minister, how closely are you monitoring copper? Because it is a very important part of your export profile.
Indeed, more than half of our exports relate to copper, and we are looking at it with a very close eye. And we have received good news. The Phase 1 deal, even from its announcement last year, had been impacting the price of copper. Now, with the agreement signed, we have seen a consistent increase in the price. And when you think on 1 cent of long-term price increase, that impacts heavily our fiscal incomes. So it is important. It's good news to see a Phase 1 agreement. It's good news for the industrial and also the manufacturing in China, and we expect a reactivation of our exports in connection with that.
Your mining minister as well said the copper price has kind of been artificially low a little bit to the trade war. So would you see more upside coming through now that we have this optimism?
Yes, we are optimistic about it, and we think and we share the assessment of of players in the market that see in the long term an increase or a higher price on copper, and that's extremely important for us. While at the same time, we're working towards the diversification of our exports matrix. In terms of markets, we are expanding our FTA with India, with ASEAN countries, with the Eurasian Economic Union and the Middle East, but also in terms of the products that we export. So we will be expanding our connection with value chains, our connection with trade and services, and we're here in Singapore today also to announcing the closure of, or the finish of the negotiation process of the first of its kind, a digital economy partnership agreement along with Singapore and New Zealand.
I wanted to ask you about some of the reasons why you're in Singapore and, of course, some of the trade deals that you are seeing across ASEAN. So which particular markets, I know you mentioned India just there as well, but what sort of free trade deals are you looking at amongst ASEAN and, of course, Asia in general?
We have recently enacted the first agreement between Indonesia, the largest ASEAN economy, and the Latin American country, the CHEPA. So we are implementing that now. We are negotiating with South Korea, with the EU, the modernization of our agreement, with Ecuador, and also with the Pacific Alliance member countries and other 4 associated candidates, New Zealand, Singapore, Australia, and also Canada. So we will have a very robust agenda, and in terms of emerging markets, we will be working in zones or geographic regions such as India. And in that sense, the way that we develop tools to embrace the digital economy and services are paramount for Chile. So that is why we're so happy and proud to see that what we launched in Viña del Mar in the MRT meeting in the context of our APEC host year last year is seeing good results, and we're delivering a good high standard agreement along with our partners from New Zealand and Singapore.